Good morning and welcome to our service for the first day of Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to unmask. I think I'll do that. I feel somewhat undressed now. I do want to take a moment to say that we who are here, that's the tech crew and our congregation president and Glenn and myself, we are all very much aware of the death late yesterday of the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I wanted to say that I will speak about Justice Ginsburg during our Yusker service next week on Yom Kippur. So I don't want you to think that this event has gone without notice and that we are not taking it seriously as we should. We're going to begin our morning service then on page 110 in the Rosh Hashanah prayer book, the Machzor, with the singing of Ma Tovu.
Ma Tovu, Ma Tovu, Alecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Ma Tovu, Ma Tovu, Alecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Va'ani berov chastecha, ahavo betecha, eshtachave el hechal kodechecha, be'yiratecha, Adonai ahavti, me'yon betecha, umekom mishkan kivodecha, mishkan kivodecha, ma tovu, ma tovu, Alecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Va'ani eshtachave, ve'echra'a, evrecha lifnei Adonai, Osi, Va'ani tefilati lecha, Adonai et ratzon, Elohim berov chastecha, Elohim berov chastecha, Aneni be'emet Yishecha, Ma tovu, Ma tovu, Alecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Ma tovu, Ma tovu, Alecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael.
121. I invite you to read with me. You have taught us, guard yourselves well, take good care of your lives. Your word calls to us, do no harm to yourself, do not weaken or exhaust yourself. In gratitude for the gift of our bodies, we pray for a year of renewed health and replenished strength. May caring for our bodies become our daily practice. May we be attentive to our need for proper food, sleep, and exercise. Let no injury come to others through our acts or failure to act, but let our mitzvah be this, to build a just society in which care is a birthright and the blessing of health the responsibility of all. Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh chol basar umafli la'asot. And we're going to continue on page 124, and that will take us through 128. These are the morning blessings, which in years past we have chanted. My partner in chanting the morning blessings absconded to Honolulu, of all places, and so we're doing it in English responsively, or antiphonally more accurately, back and forth. And Cantor Groper, I am going to start. Is that good with you? Yeah.
I'm in agreement.
Okay, good. So, on page 124, you are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power gave the mind discernment to distinguish light from darkness.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power opens eyes that cannot see.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power brings freedom to the captive.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power lifts up the fallen.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power spreads the land upon the waters.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power has made all I need.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power gives firmness to our steps.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power clothes the naked.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power gives strength to the weary.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power removes sleep from my eyes, slumber from my eyelids.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power made me in the image of God.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power endowed me with human freedom.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power has made me Yisrael.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power gives strength to Israel.
You are the source of blessings, Adonai. Your great power crowns Yisrael with glory. We move directly now to page 141 for Chatzi Kaddish, which will bring the introductory section of the service to a conclusion, and then we will be able to proceed to the main body of the service. Page 141.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויעלמה דברה חירותה, וימליך מלכותה, בחיי כל ויום כל, ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילא ולעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דע מהירן בעלמא Amen.
Before we proceed with the rest of the service, this is the moment when our congregational president, Rochelle Lafer, will be speaking to us about where we are and where we're going and things like that. Rochelle?
Thank you, Rabbi. Boker Tov. Good morning to you all, and welcome to Beth Israel, the Jewish congregation of Sun City Center. I'm Rochelle Lafer, and I have the honor of serving as president of this wonderful congregation. In October 2011, my husband Bill and I moved from Binghamton, New York, where we had raised our 4 children, to Sun City Center in search of sunshine and warmer weather. Bill was never a big fan of organized religion, but being connected to a temple was important for me. I drove to the temple and found the name of Bob Gazinski listed on the board outside the door. When I called Bob, he was delighted to meet me at the temple on Friday night for Shabbat services. Off I went on Friday night, and as I walked through the door, I was greeted by Ellen Stein. As we chatted, she asked me how involved I would like to be in the temple. The next thing I knew, I was elected the new programming vice president of Sisterhood. And so began my connection to the Beth Israel family. When Bill passed away in January of 2018, I knew that I was now ready to join the executive board of the temple. After a year as first vice president, Joanne Sudman was more than ready to hand over the reins of president to Beth Israel. Following the annual meeting in December of 2019, I became the new president of Beth Israel. Little did I know when I began my term in January that 3 months later we would be leaving our temple and isolating ourselves in our homes. Life with the COVID-19 virus became our new normal. But we Jews are a stubborn group. We've been around a long time. It didn't take long before we found a way to stay connected. Through the magic of Zoom and the skills of our incredible technology team, we have been able to celebrate Shabbat each Friday night together. Not only do we get to see each other for a half hour before services begin, but we've been treated to Shabbat music from around the world that has greatly enriched our Shabbat experience, thanks to the efforts of Rabbi Carla Friedman and the internet. Shortly after we closed the doors to the temple, we faced the dilemma of how to deal with Passover. Obviously, our Passover Seder at the temple was no longer an option. Not a problem. Rabbi Carla led us in a Zoom Seder with all the traditional items on the Seder plate. Then we all enjoyed a Passover meal in our own homes. As a congregation, we've gotten pretty good at Zooming. We have been Zooming for classes, for lectures, for sisterhood and men's club events, for an afternoon of music and entertainment by some of our very talented members, including Rabbi Carla's grandson, Jesse, and we even played Sunday afternoon bingo. Unfortunately, as time went by, it became apparent we were not likely to return to our temple home before the High Holy Days. How would we best serve the needs of our senior community and bring everyone together? We decided it was time to move the temple into the 21st century. With Dan Barwick taking the lead, we began to look into streaming services from the temple. This would allow us to do our High Holy Day services inside the sanctuary and have everyone watch it live. It would also give us the ability to continue to stream our services on Friday nights after the High Holy Days, so that our members who are not able to get to temple could join us each week from home. What a project this has been. Sometimes it felt like we took one step forward and 2 steps backwards. but here we are coming into your home live from the temple. I would be remiss if I did not offer my sincere gratitude to the people who helped to make this all possible. A huge thank you to Dan Barwick, Alla Barwick, Bob Kobe, John Gamson, Bernie Katz, Nina Malinak, Robin Kitzmiller, Delise Axon, Donna Wiener, and Jody Rome-Avris for making this a reality. As I mentioned in my Holy Day letter to the congregation, this has been a difficult year for us. Given the constraints of the COVID-19 virus, our fundraising has been severely impacted. Unfortunately, that is not the case with our expenses. Even with the building closed, we continue to have all our regular expenses. And just like at home, they continue to increase in cost. The cost of installing the streaming system has been significant, but it was felt that this was something that needed to be done for the future of our congregation. Given our unforeseen expenses, this year more than ever, we need support with a High Holy Day pledge. Please help us to continue to provide a special place for each of you with your generous donation. I wish you all a Shana Tova Tikotevu, V'Tikatemu. Please, may you be inscribed and sealed for a good year.
Thank you, Rochelle. We're going to continue now on page 142 with the call to worship. Please rise.
Et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Le'olam Va'ed.
And we continue on page 145. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories and into the windows of even the miserable and the crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star that just happens to be where you are in the universe to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness, in kindness. Page 146, we're going to be reading together through page 148, and I invite you at home to read with me. I am advised that I have been reading too quickly. I'm going to try to slow down. No promises. Love abundant, love unstinting, our God, you have enfolded us in love. Tender compassion beyond all bounds, your precious gift. Our fathers and mothers gave you their trust, and you gave them Torah, laws by which to live. For their sake, teach us as well. Grace us with your guidance. Loving Father, merciful Mother of us all, grant us clear understanding that we may listen, learn, and teach, preserve, practice, and fulfill with love every lesson of your Torah. May learning your Torah lighten up our eyes. May our hearts embrace your mitzvot. Unite us in love and reverence for you, that we may never feel ashamed of our deeds. We have trusted in your great name. Now let us celebrate at last the joy of your salvation. Bring us in peace from the four corners of the earth, and lead us up with the upright pride to the land that is ours. For you are a God of miracles and wonders. From all the peoples of the earth you sought us out and brought us near to your great enduring truth. So with love we acknowledge and proclaim that you are one. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher ba'amo Yisrael, be'ahava. That brings us, of course, to the Shema on page 150, and we will continue through 152 and 153. We'll sing the Shema out loudly and proudly, and Baruch Shem softly, and then we will chant the V'ahavta, page 150.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malakuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha B'kol levacha u'b'kol nafshecha u'b'kol me'odecha Ve'hayu advarim ha'ele Asher Anochi mitzavecha Hayom al vavecha Ve'shinantam levanecha Ve'dibarta b'ham Ve'shivtecha beveitecha U'velektecha v'derech U'v'shokbecha u'v'kumecha U'kishartam le'ot al yadecha Ve'hayu totafot bein einecha U'ketavtam amezuzot beitecha u'v'sha'arecha Le'man tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Emet. We continue now on page 161. The beginning of your word is truth. If you exist at all, I know you can't abide hypocrisy, and most of all, you don't want prayers that lie. You'd rather get an honest fight than strings of empty platitudes. So I can't pretend or hide in pious phrases given to me by the past. It's hard to speak my own imperfect truth. In fact, the more I say, the less I seem to know, and the farther away I get from you, whatever you might be. I've heard that what you really want is not more words, you want the heart. That might be more than I can give, but I can try. Page 163. Where does Israel get the courage, the chutzpah, to go on believing in redemption in a world that knows mass hunger, political exile, and war? How can Jews testify to hope and human value when they have been continuously persecuted, hated, expelled, destroyed? How? Out of the memories of the Exodus. We are going to read the next text responsively. Remember the stories of slavery, and you will never stop working for freedom. Remember their fear at the edge of the sea, and self-doubt will never defeat you. Remember when desperation turned to celebration, and you will never let go of hope. Remember the words of the Baal Shem Tov, Forgetfulness leads to exile. Remembrance is the secret of redemption. Page 164, Mi Chamocha.
Mi chamocha volim Adonai, mi chamocha nedal v'kodesh, norat hilot oseh feleh, shira chadasha shibchu geulim, לשמחה אספת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם
Momentarily, we are going to continue on that same page with Tzur Yisrael, and the third word of the text is kuma. It may not be the third word you hear, but it is the third word of the text. And when you hear it, you should treat that as an invitation to rise for the Amidah, so that when we get to the Amidah directly afterwards, you'll be ready.
Yisrael, Koma b'ezrat Yisrael, Koma b'ezrat Yisrael, go Alenu, Adonai Tzivot Shema Kedosh Yisrael. Baruch Ata Adonai God Yisrael.
Page 166, we begin the Amidah.
Adonai, Sefatai tiftach, ufi yagit tehilatecha. Adonai, Sefatai tiftach, ufi yagit tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Adonai, Sifatai tiftach, ufi yagit tehilatecha. Adonai, Sifatai tiftach, ufi yagit tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Ha'nara, אל עליון, גומר חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו ביאהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכתבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה, רב להושיע, מוריד הטל. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ברופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בגבורות, ומי דומה לך. מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, מי כמוך אב הרחמים, זוכה יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל.
The liturgy of the High Holy Days is somewhat different from the rest of the year, and what follows now is a hallmark of the changes to the High Holy Day liturgy. This is one of the central prayers of our worship on these occasions, and it is a powerful and important part of the theme of the High Holy Days. We begin on page 174 with Unetaneh Tokef. I will start with the reading on 175, and this is a responsive reading. Let us embrace the day and its holiness, for this day is a throne of goodness and power. When the people of Israel do God's will, they strengthen God's power on high. But when the people of Israel fail to do God's will, they weaken, if one might say it, God's great power on high. So let this day recall your power and ours. Let it remind us of our promises kept and broken, as we remind you of yours. Let this day be a throne of forgiveness, for today we are the accountants of our souls, the navigators of our hearts, seeking wholeness and new direction. And we seek you through signs of your presence in the arc of sacred history. I make this covenant not with you alone, but with those who are standing here with us this day, and with those who are not. God of ages past and future, God of this day, as you were with our mothers and fathers, be with us as well.
כי אתה הוא דיין ומוכיח, ויודע ועד, וכותב וכותב, וסופר ומנה, ותזכור כל הנשכחות, ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, ומעליו יקרא. וחתם יד כל אדם בו. ובשופר גדול ייתוקה, וכל דממה דקה יישמע. ומלאכים יחפזון, חיל ורדה יוחזון, יאמרו הנה יום הדין, לפקוד עצבם ארון בדין. כי לא יזכו בניך בדין, וכל באי עולם יעברו לפניך. כי כבת קראת רואה את מעביר צפונו תחת שבטו. כן תעביר ותספור ותמנה ותפקוד נפש כל חי ותחתוך, כי צפה לך בריאה, לך בריאה, ותכתוב את כסה דינו. בראש השנה יכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יכתבו. בראש השנה יכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יכתבו.
On Rosh Hashanah, we plunge like swimmers into a sea of words. On Yom Kippur, the sea rises, then crests, and we emerge sealed by the wax, warmed by the fire of braided candle. The new year is like a trailhead opening wide before us. The day of fasting, narrow, breathless, so quick to close. We contemplate a new year, and this we know. Some of us will live, and some of us will die. Some will die young, and some very old. Some by water, and some by fire. Some by sword, and some by beast. Some by hunger, and some by thirst. Some by plague, and some by earthquake. Some by stoning, and some by strangling.
Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, uvyom tzom kippur yichatemun. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun, uvyom tzom kippur yichatemun.
Some of us will feel at ease, some will be restless. Some will have peace of mind, some will have strife. Some will be tranquil, some will be tormented. Some will be raised high, some will be brought low. Some will have riches, some will be impoverished.
Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, uveyom tzom kippur yechatemun.
Even so, the way we act, the way we speak, the way we meet God's image in ourselves and in others, these things have great power to make our lives matter. Therefore, let us make whole the broken shards, green and thick the withering grass. Let the wind fill us with urgency for life. Let dreams give birth to justice and goodness. God of holiness, God of hope, let us glimpse your truth as we attach our hope to yours.
Uteshuva, utefila, utzedaka, ma'avirin et rava hagzah.
On page 181, and we will read responsively. I speak these words, but I don't believe them. Adonai God formed man from the dust of the earth. Clearly, there's no scientific foundation. You know how we are formed. You remember that we are dust. And human beings are the gloriously complex product. Remember that we are dust. Of evolution from single-celled organisms. Remember that we are dust. And as for our end, well, no need to dwell on that right now. By the sweat of your brow shall you get bread to eat until you return to the ground. So much to do and so many ways to keep busy. For from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. For what would it mean if it were true after all? We are going to continue now on page 184 with the Kedusha. Please rise for the Kedusha.
לקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ, כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו, מה אדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד הוא אלוהינו, hu avinu hu malkeinu, hu moshienu vehu yashmienu, berachamav le'enei kol chai. Ani Adonai Elohechem, yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Zion, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם ועד. כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה. קדוש אתה ונורא שמך, ואין אלוה מבלעדיך. ככתוב ויגבר אדוני צבאות במשפט, והאל הקדוש נקדוש בצדקה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
We're going to continue now on page 196. Please be seated. Our God and God of the generations before us, may a memory of us ascend and come before you. May it be heard and seen by you, winning your favor and reaching your awareness, together with the memory of our ancestors, the memory of your sacred city, Jerusalem, and the memory of your people, the family of Israel. May we be remembered for safety, well-being, and favor, for love and compassion, for life and for peace on this day of remembrance. Eternal our God, remember us. Be mindful of us. Amen. And redeem us for a life of goodness and blessing. Amen. And we continue on 198. God who is ours and God of our fathers and mothers, in your glory reign over the infinite expanse of space and time. In your grandeur be exalted, through your power show us your reality. Then all who dwell on earth shall understand that you are their maker. Astound us with the beauty of your presence, so that every breath of life shall say, eternal is the God of Israel, all-embracing God's rule and sovereignty. We're going to continue now with another element of the High Holy Days service, particularly the Rosh Hashanah service, which is the Great Alenu. It turns out that the Alenu prayer, which we use on a regular basis as part of the conclusion of a service, was actually written for this part of the service. And it says, and you'll find the text coming up shortly, but it says that our duty is to praise the Master of all, to acknowledge the greatness of the Creator from the beginning, the fashioner of creation, who has not made us like the other peoples of the earth, the other nations of the earth, and has not made us like the rest of the families of the planet, who has not made our portion like theirs and our fortune like the rest of them. And it is upon us, and we therefore bow, and we acknowledge and thank the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed is God. That's the essence of the Alenu, and that is the text that was written for this section of the service. And going to begin this part of the service on page 202. Please rise for the great Alenu.
Alenu, le Shabbat. ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונה. משתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
If this were not a Shabbat morning, we would now proceed to the shofar service. But because it is Shabbat, we don't do a shofar sounding. There are some people who think that, that the reason the shofar is not sounded on Shabbat is that it would mean that we'd have to carry the shofar to temple in order to sound it. But that isn't actually the reason. And the why for is that we could get around that. We could bring the shofar in advance of Shabbat and just have it here and sound the shofar. So that's not the reason. The real reason that we don't do the shofar sounding on Shabbat is that if there were some problem with the sounding of it, we might be inclined to try to repair it, and that you can't do. So that's why we don't do the shofar sounding on the Shabbat day of Rosh Hashanah. So we're going to continue now on page 203. And we're not, I don't know why we're going to do that, but we are, so let's do it anyway. Let's read it responsively. Awake, you sleepers, from your slumber, rouse yourselves from your sleep. Awake like Israel at the sea to the joyful song of Miriam and Moses. Sing to the eternal, for God has surged in triumph. The eternal shall reign forever and ever. Awake like Israel at Sinai to the dignity of being God's partners. You shall be for me a holy nation, a sovereign community of priests. Examine your deeds and return to God. Remember your Creator, you who are caught up in the daily routine, losing sight of eternal truth. You who waste your years in vain pursuits that neither profit nor save. Hear the rousing call to repentance. With trumpets and the blast of shofar, raise a shout before the eternal, the sovereign. Hear and know the truth of a higher power. God is sovereign, robed in majesty, God is clothed with strength, so the world stands firm and cannot be shaken. We're going to continue now on page 208. God who is ours and God of our fathers and mothers, may our rest on this Shabbat bring you pleasure. Lead us to holiness through your mitzvot, and may each of us find a portion of Torah that is ours. You bestow such goodness. Teach us to be satisfied and to know the joy of your salvation. Let your holy Shabbat be our heritage, embraced freely and with love. And may all our people bring holiness to your name by resting on this day. Help us to serve you truly with purity of heart, for you are a faithful God whose truth stands forever. Baruch atah Adonai, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh haShabbat v'Yisrael v'yom hazikaron.
Baruch atah Adonai, melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh haShabbat. Melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh haShabbat. Mekadesh haShabbat v'Yisrael v'yom hazikaron.
We continue now on page 209 with the prayer that asks God to accept our worship.
Ritzei, Ritzei, Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, B'yamecha Yisrael, U'tefilatam, B'yahava tikabel, U'tehi l'ratzon tamid, U'tehi l'ratzon tamid, Avodat Yisrael Amecha, El Karov l'chol korav, El Karov l'chol korav, P'nei El avadecha v'chonenu, Shefok ruchacha Alenu, v'techazen einenu, v'shuvecha l'tzion b'rachamim. Baruch atah Adonai, hamachazir shechinato, l'tzion. Hamachazir shechinato l'tzion.
The reading which follows is not in the prayer book. Just outside the walls of Jerusalem, to the west, there is a steep wadi called in Hebrew Gei Ben Hinnom, the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom. In ancient Israel, during the time of the kings, this valley was the site of a pagan cult devoted to the god called Moloch. In this valley, Moloch was worshipped with human sacrifices, especially of children. In Jewish tradition, the name of this place, Gehinnom, became the term for hell. Several years ago, Israeli archaeologists excavating in Gehinnom made a tremendous discovery. They found a burial cave, the tomb of a wealthy Jewish family from the period just after the destruction of the temple in 569 BCE. For some reason, this family had not been taken into exile by Babylon, and somehow, over the centuries, this cave had escaped the attention of tomb robbers. When the entrance was cleared away and the cave was opened, the archaeologists unearthed a number of pieces of pottery, some household objects, and also, unexpectedly, something of great historical significance. They came upon 2 amulets, tiny silver scrolls, just a few inches long. Encrusted with dirt and corrosion, they had been hidden there for over 2,600 years. The archaeologists turned these 2 scrolls over to specialists who worked carefully and patiently for many months. They finally managed to clean the scrolls and open them up, gently, slowly, 1 line at a time. When they were finished, they found to their astonishment a still legible inscription. It is now the oldest biblical text in our hands. And this is what they found. May Adonai bless you and keep you. May Adonai's countenance shine upon you and be gracious to you. May Adonai's countenance be lifted up to you, and may you be granted peace. They had discovered an ancient benediction out of Gehinnom, a blessing which somehow survived in and through hell, a sign of hope, hope for us, the descendants of those who first wrote those words of blessing, the descendants who still recite these words today. And that is our introduction to the priestly benediction, which is on page 214. Please rise. And our part will be Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Yevarechecha Adonai ve'yishmerecha.
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka.
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha
Ken Yehi Ratzon. Please be seated. We continue on page 216. Let there be peace, grant goodness, blessing, and grace, constancy and compassion to us and all Israel, your people. Avinu, bless and unite all human beings in the light of your presence, for your light has shown us a holy path for living, devotion to love, generosity, blessedness, mercy, life, and peace. In your goodness, bless your people Israel with peace at all times.
Sefer Chaim, Beracha v'shalom, u'parnasa tova, nizachem v'nikatev lefanecha, אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים, לחיים טובים ולשלום. Baruch atah Adonai, oseh hashalom.
Please take this opportunity for personal and private prayer. Page 222, again a responsive reading. Loving Father, infinite power, gentle, forgiving, lofty, inscrutable, Avinu, Malkeinu, compassionate Mother, omnipotent Lord, comforting presence, fathomless mystery, Avinu, Malkeinu, our rock and redeemer, life of the universe, close to us always, impossibly far, Avinu, Malkeinu, embracing, confounding, accepting our frailty, decreeing our end, Avinu, Malkeinu. None of these are true, none of them are you, yet we stand as those before us have stood, summoned to judgment, longing for love. Avinu, Malkeinu, may these words be a bridge. They come from our hearts. May they lead us to you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Amol Alenu, Ve'alol Alenu, Ve'tapeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Deve, Vechere Virav, Me'alenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Kol Tzar, Umastin, Me'alenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kotveinu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, Chodesh Alenu, Chodesh Alenu, Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kadesh Alenu, Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu, Shema Kolenu, Shema Kolenu.
On page 224, we're going to read the English of this text antiphonally, Cantor Groper and I, and we invite you to join us. Avinu Malkeinu, we stand in awe, we draw close in love. Avinu Malkeinu, the power that passes through us and pervades all things. Avinu Malkeinu, the divine that is present within and among us.
We speak this, Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu, we speak this sacred truth aloud.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha, we stand as one accountable for our sins.
Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Alenu V'al Ol Alenu V'tapenu, we yearn for true compassion for our children most of all.
Avinu Malkeinu Kale Dever V'cherev V'ra'av Me'alenu, may we resist the ravages of illness, fear, and despair.
Avinu Malkeinu Kale Kol Tsar Umastin Me'alenu, let us summon courage to withstand our enemies.
Avinu Malkeinu Kotvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim, let the goodness of this gift of life be engraved upon our hearts.
Avinu Malkeinu Kadesh Alenu Shana Tova, may we taste anew the sweetness of each day.
Avinu Malkeinu Malei Yadenu B'Virchotecha, let us wake up to the blessing already in our grasp.
Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu Va'anenu Kien Banu Masim, Aseh Manu Tzedakah V'Chesed V'Hoshienu. However small our deeds, let us see their power to heal. May we save lives through compassion, generosity, and justice.
If this were not a season severely disrupted by the coronavirus, we would be beginning the Torah service now. But we came to understand, as I said last evening, that we could not bring people onto the bima for the Torah service because we would be violating all the rules of social distancing and exposing ourselves and each other to the possibility of the transmission of the virus, and we are not going to do that in our house of worship. So instead, I am going to invite you to enjoy something that you may not have done for a long time, as you may not have done this for yourself for a long time. You may have participated in this experience for the benefit of your children and grandchildren, reading them a story. I'm going to read a story to you. And so sit back and listen to the story. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. God said, take your son, your only one, the one you love, Isaac, and go forth to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I'll show you. Abraham rose early, saddled his donkey, chopped wood for the burnt offering, took Isaac his son and his 2 lads, and set out for the place that God had spoken of to him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Abraham said to his servant lads, stay here with the donkey, the lad and I will go yonder. We will worship and return to you. Abraham then took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. In his own hand he held the firestone and the knife, and the 2 of them went on together. Isaac then said to Abraham his father, "Father?" He answered, "Here I am, my son." And Isaac said, "Here's the firestone and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham replied, "God will see to the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. They came to the place that God had shown him. There Abraham built the altar and arranged the wood and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Abraham now reached out and took the knife to slay his son. But out of heaven an angel of the Eternal called to him, saying, "Abraham, Abraham!" And he replied, "Here I am." The angel then said, "Do not lay your hand on the lad. Do nothing to him. For now I know that you are one who fears God, as you did not withhold your son, your only one, from me." Abraham lifted his eyes. He could now see a ram just after it was caught by its horns in a thicket. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham named the place Adonai Yireh. To this day people say, "On the mount of the Eternal God will be seen." Then out of heaven an angel of the Eternal called to Abraham a second time, saying, By myself I swear, says the Eternal One, that because you did this thing and did not withhold your son, your only one, I will bless you greatly and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sands of the seashore, and your descendants shall take possession of the gates of their foes. And through your descendants the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you hearkened to my voice. Abraham then returned to his servants. They got up and traveled to Beersheba, and Abraham settled in Beersheba. The Torah readings chosen by our sages for Rosh Hashanah are always a puzzle. For the first day, the rabbis of old established that we would read Genesis 21, 1 through 34, which is the story of Isaac's entry into the world, born to Sarah, his mother, when she was 90 years old, and to his father Abraham when he was 100 years old. For the second day, they assigned the very next chapter, Genesis 22, 1 through 24, the story of Abraham and Isaac going up Mount Moriah, where the father attempts to sacrifice his son to his invisible God. The justification for this is that the second story ends with the substitution of a ram for the boy, and that ram suddenly appears, snared in the brush by its own ram's horn. Ram's horn, Rosh Hashanah, get it? The rabbis always sought some explicit connection between the occasion and the Torah reading assigned to it, and this was the best they could do. It is an unfortunate choice because the 2 days' readings always raise questions, not to mention hackles, for modern readers. The story of Isaac's birth to elderly parents strains credulity. That is probably especially true for us because we, advanced in age, can clearly see the challenges of bearing and then raising a child at the ages specified in the Torah. As people began to read the Torah critically in the 19th century, they rejected the ages of Abraham and Sarah as unrealistic, and that undermined their acceptance of the entire Torah, which had already begun with the lifespans of the first 20 generations of humans earlier in the book of Genesis. Then the whole story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, which some have construed as a male bonding experience gone awry, the whole story of the Akedah is deeply troubling. First, since God delayed the birth of this child until his parents were very well on in years, causing them untold, literally not told in the Torah, untold grief and anxiety, why did God then demand that Abraham make a burnt offering of the long-awaited son? Second, why did Abraham comply with this demand? And third, and not least important, why should we honor, praise, and worship this God? The traditional answer about the delayed arrival of Isaac is twofold. We learn that God controls fertility, and that the patriarchs and matriarchs all came to perceive this. So in each of the founding generations of our people, the heir to God's promises comes into the world when God permits it, and not sooner, no matter how troubling that is to the people involved. And we are taught that, especially in the case of Abraham, God was testing him to demonstrate his unwavering faith. That, of course, is the answer to the second question. Why did Abraham comply with the demand? Abraham, who bargained with God over the fate of people he didn't even know, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, does not question God's command to sacrifice his son. Traditional Jewish commentators tell us that Abraham passed this test. I am not alone in suggesting that he failed it. The subject of the test was his willingness to do whatever God told him. When he argued with God about the destiny of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham asked, "Shall not the judge of all the world act justly?" Why did he not demand justice for his own and Sarah's only son? I say, why did not the exemplar of righteousness protect his innocent son? Is it any wonder that Jews and others reading this story see it as an indictment of God? Why indeed would Abraham remain faithful to a God who required the sacrifice of Isaac? What is there to praise in this horrific demand? Don't we want a God who is more empathic, kinder, gentler, a God who acts out of mercy and loving kindness? I have only once found an interpretation of the story that gives me some comfort. Rabbi Michael Lerner, the founder of Tikkun magazine, wrote in his 1994 book, Jewish Renewal, that the Hebrew text of the Akedah allows us a nuanced understanding of this story. He notes that when we are told that God commanded Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, the term for God is Ha-Elohim, which is usually translated as God. But it can be translated literally as the gods. And Lerner says that Abraham had not yet completely left behind the gods of Mesopotamia, which did in fact mandate child sacrifice. But when God intervenes to prevent the murder, the term for God is Yud-He-Vav-He, which is the personal name of the God of Judaism. So Lerner reads this story as Abraham still responding to the traditions of his ancestors and being stopped short of murder by the God who prohibits such acts. If we accept Lerner's reading, then the God we pray to is not the one who commands the sacrifice of Isaac, but the God who prohibits and prevents that action. By this account, God comes out very well. Later in Torah, in Deuteronomy, we will be told that God will never demand of us what is evil. Any prophet who tests our loyalty to God by demanding that we abandon God or that we do evil things should be identified as a false prophet and should be removed from the community immediately. But Abraham's actions are problematic. If he were still hearing the Mesopotamian gods, shouldn't Abraham have refused to comply with the order? In our own time, we have come to understand that resisting immoral orders from superiors, whether in the Nazi army or from racist officials, is indefensible. The problem with holding Abraham to that standard is that human sacrifice was universally understood to please the gods. How was he to know that this practice was morally repugnant to the one true God? The Hebrew Bible is not a theological treatise. It never spells out the idea that there is only one God. The text we sing at every evening and morning service, which comes from Torah, Mi Chamocha, says, "Who is like you, Adonai, among the gods?" The Shema, which we recite at every evening and morning service, also from the Torah, says that God is one, as opposed to many. And one is not a synonym for only. When God is described, it is in terms of attributes, without explaining how that should be translated into our behavior. For example, we are taught in Exodus 34:6 that God is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in goodness and truth, being merciful to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgressions, and sin. We can deduce from this declaration that God, being merciful and gracious, would not require or even permit child sacrifice, but it is up to us to derive that. Every once in a while, someone will ask me why God does things. Recently, I was asked what we have done to cause God to deliver the current pandemic to all the corners of the planet. I always point out that people used to attribute all the extreme elements of weather to the immediate will and action of God. There is no word in the Hebrew Bible for science, which means knowledge, nor for nature, which suggests the order in all life on the planet. So our ancestors could only explain things like hurricanes, floods, and sandstorms as the will of God. We now have enough knowledge to understand how the ordered interplay of various phenomena can come together to create those weather events. So aside from some fundamentalist Jews and Christians in our society, people don't attribute these events to the will of God. Accordingly, we understand that a pandemic occurs when various disparate elements come together to produce a perfect storm. It is not an act of God. And that brings me back to the God Abraham thought he was listening to when he saddled his donkey and schlepped Isaac out to their rendezvous with destiny at Mount Moriah. We Jews have for centuries described Abraham as the first monotheist and the first Jew. Nowhere in the narratives about Abraham is there any indication that he believes in one God, nor is there any indication that he doesn't. Unfortunately, the Torah doesn't report what Abraham was thinking or feeling, so we cannot know how he felt about being told to sacrifice Isaac. But we can say that we, in our time, find the idea of a God commanding human sacrifice unacceptable to us, and that it runs contrary to the God concept that lies at the heart of Judaism as it has evolved. The idea of God has changed over the approximately 2,500 years of Jewish theological development. It is not uncommon to find that some people, especially some Christians, consider the God of the Hebrew Bible to be a harsh, punitive deity, in contrast to the portrayal of God in the Christian scriptures as a God of love. But that is simplistic. If we thought of the Torah as a novel, we would have no difficulty seeing the evolution of the character, God, who goes from being a hands-on creator to a distant chess master, using humans as instruments of judgment against each other. Knowing that the Torah describes God as merciful, gracious, slow to anger, and eager to forgive should teach us something about the fundamental God concept of our heritage. It should teach us that repentance is both possible and desirable, that forgiveness brings comfort, and that whatever befalls us, we can turn to God for comfort. If we blame God for a hurricane or a pandemic, where do we turn for comfort or hope? I imagine Abraham, the knife dropped from his shaking hand, watching as the angel unbinds Isaac from the altar and replaces him with that sheep. I imagine Abraham falling to his knees, weeping with gratitude for being relieved of this awful task. I imagine Abraham clutching Isaac to him and saying, "Thank God, thank God." And I imagine Isaac also shaking and weeping and saying, "Thank God, thank God." None of that is in the Torah. But it fits with the understanding that Abraham comes to some appreciation of this unseen God who will not demand immoral things of us humans. And it opens for us the idea that we can turn to God for comfort as long as we leave the door open to that possibility. What is in the Torah is that neither Abraham nor Isaac blames this traumatic incident on God. Just as Moses and the Israelites accept that God liberated them from slavery, but do not ask what was God's role in their enslavement years earlier, Abraham and his descendants focus on the loving, kind, gentle, nurturing aspects of our God. This year, I think we, as descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Moses, could use some of that comfort too. We come now to the part of the service that everyone looks forward to with such enthusiasm, announcements.
Thank you, Rabbi Carla and Cantor Glenn, for a wonderful Rosh Hashanah service, and a very special thank you to our tech team around the corner in the closet. Without Robin Kitzmiller, Nina Malinak, Donna Wiener, Delise Axon, and Dan Barwick, none of these services would be happening. Join us tonight at 7:30 to usher in the second day of Rosh Hashanah. This service will be on Zoom, and you should have gotten the link to Zoom yesterday before the holiday began. Tomorrow, we gather again at 10 a.m. for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which will include the shofar service. Classes this week will meet as usual on Tuesday and Thursday. Friday night services will be on Zoom at 7:30 with the meet and greet starting at 7. Next Saturday, there will be Torah study from noon to 1:30. Bring your own lunch at 11:30 and join us on Zoom to schmooze before class. See you tonight on Zoom.
I'm going to use the authority vested in me, which may have been a mistake, but nonetheless, to invite you to tune in this evening starting at 7 p.m. for our evening service, which will begin at 7:30. But we will be able to schmooze a little bit beforehand. So if you're available, tune in between 7 and 7:30, and we will get to say hello to each other. We are going to begin the conclusion of this morning's service on page 286 with the Alenu. Please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Please be seated. And we continue on page 289, reading together. May the time not be distant, our God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when lies and bigotry shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. So may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your dominion be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever.
והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Page 291. There are stars up above so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days These are the ways we remember. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 292. Please rise for Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, be'alma divarach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayei chon u'v'yomei chon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal Shmei Kedusha brichu, la'ela u'la'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim Alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav Huyaseh shalom Alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru Amen. Please be seated. We're going to conclude the service on page 294 with the singing of Hayom Ta'amtzenu.
Hayom, 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 hayom t'yamseinu, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom tevarchenu, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom tegadleinu, amen. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, 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 tidreshenu letova, amen. Hayom, 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 tichtevenu lechayim tovim, amen. Hayom, 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 tishma Shabbatenu, amen. Hayom, 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 tikaber berachamim uvratzon et tfilatenu, amen. Hayom, 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 titmechenu b'mitzidkecha, amen.
And that concludes the service. Thank you for being with us. We will see you hopefully this evening. Be well. Amen.
Amen. Amen.